The church was glowing in soft gold light that late afternoon, every pew lined with fresh white roses and ribbons. The air smelled like new beginnings, that sweet, nervous blend of perfume, candles, and polished wood. Everyone was smiling. Everyone except me. I sat in the front row, my hands clenched around the bouquet I was supposed to be holding for the rehearsal. My son, Ethan, stood near the altar with his fiancée, Lila, their fingers intertwined, their faces glowing with excitement. Tomorrow, they were supposed to be husband and wife. It should have been a perfect moment, a proud mother watching her son step into the next chapter of his life. But something in my chest wouldn't let me breathe right, because all week I'd felt it. A tension in the air I couldn't name. Lila avoiding my eyes. My husband, David, acting strangely quiet whenever her name came up. I brushed it off as wedding stress. I told myself I was overthinking. But deep down, something didn't sit right, and I was about to find out why. The priest, Father Matthew, cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses. "All right," he said kindly. "Let's take it from the vows again, shall we?" Lila smiled shyly and turned to Ethan. "I, Lila Grace Parker, take you, Ethan James Reynolds." Her voice trembled slightly, but it was the kind of trembling that came with excitement. Ethan beamed at her, so completely in love it made my heart ache. Father Matthew nodded approvingly, then turned to Ethan. "And now you, Ethan?" But he suddenly stopped. The smile vanished from his face. His brows furrowed as he glanced down at the papers in his hand, then back up at Lila. Something flickered across his expression. Confusion, then disbelief. He looked again, flipping through the folder, scanning the documents carefully. Then he straightened, his tone uneasy. "I'm sorry," he said slowly, looking from Lila to Ethan. "But we can't proceed." The room fell silent. Ethan blinked. I don't understand." "What do you mean?" Father Matthew hesitated, glancing toward the couple, then at David and me. "There seems to be a record. A registration." He swallowed. "Lila Parker and David Reynolds are already listed as married." The sound that escaped my throat wasn't human. "What?" I whispered. Ethan laughed nervously, his voice shaking. "That must be a mistake, right?" "There's no way." But Lila's face had drained of all color. Her lips parted, her eyes wide, frozen, and David, my husband, didn't say a word. He didn't move. He just stared at the floor. My stomach turned cold. "David," I said, my voice trembling. "Say something. Tell them this is a mistake." He didn't look up. The silence was unbearable. Finally, Father Matthew cleared his throat again, his voice softer. "Mrs. Reynolds, Mr. Reynolds, perhaps we should step outside." But I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I just kept staring at David, the man I'd loved for nearly 30 years, waiting for him to laugh, to explain, to deny. He didn't. The whispers began immediately. Ethan's best man leaned over, whispering something. Lila's bridesmaids exchanged uneasy looks. My son looked lost, his eyes darting between his fiancé and his father. "Dad, what's going on? Why would your name be on her?" Lila suddenly burst into tears. "Ethan, please, let me explain." "Explain?" Ethan's voice broke. "Explain how you're married to my father?" The words shattered the air like glass. My knees went weak. Margaret, my sister, caught me by the arm and whispered, "Rosa, sit down." But I couldn't. I stood frozen in the aisle, watching my family collapse in real time. David finally lifted his head. His eyes met mine, and that's when I saw it. Guilt. Raw, undeniable guilt. My heart cracked open. "David," I whispered, "tell me it isn't true." He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Just a faint broken sound, the kind that made the truth clear without needing to be said. It was true. Lila turned toward me, tears streaking down her face. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," she sobbed. "He told me he'd handle it before the wedding. Handle it." The words echoed through my head like thunder. The priest stepped back, visibly uncomfortable. "Perhaps it's best we end this for today," he murmured, But I wasn't done. I took a step forward, my voice trembling but sharp. You're telling me my husband married my son's fiancée? Behind all our backs? No one answered. Lila's sobs filled the silence. Ethan looked like he'd been punched in the chest. And David, my husband, my partner, my supposed best friend, couldn't even look at me. Margaret's hand gripped my shoulder. Rosa, come on. Let's go outside. But I couldn't move. My legs felt rooted to the floor. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Everyone was staring now. Friends, family, people we'd known for years, their faces pale with shock. Pity, horror. Finally, Ethan spoke again, his voice shaking with rage. You married her? David finally looked up, and his eyes filled with something I didn't expect. Regret. Real painful regret. It was a mistake, he said weakly. It was never supposed to mean anything. Ethan's voice cracked as he shouted, You married her! The words echoed through the church like thunder, bouncing off the walls until they were the only thing I could hear. Then everything went still, and in that silence, I realized my family, the one I thought I'd built so carefully, had just been destroyed, not by time, not by tragedy, but by betrayal. And the worst part? It had all started long before I ever walked into that church. The world outside the church spun in slow motion. Guests whispered in tight clusters, their faces pale with disbelief, their phones already buzzing. The soft glow of the sunset should have made everything look beautiful. But instead, it painted the scene in a strange, cruel gold. Lila sat on the church steps, sobbing into her hands. Her white rehearsal dress, once perfect, was wrinkled and smudged with tears. Ethan stood a few feet away, pacing like a man trying to outrun the truth. And David, my husband, stood by the car, staring at nothing, as if he couldn't believe what he'd done. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My sister Margaret kept one arm around me, muttering quiet curses under her breath. That man has lost his mind. He's absolutely lost it. But I barely heard her. I was staring at Lila, trying to understand. How could this girl, the one who'd sat in my kitchen laughing, the one who'd called me mom for the past year, be married to my husband? How? Ethan finally turned on his father, his voice trembling but sharp. Say something. Tell me this isn't what it looks like. David rubbed a hand over his face, his voice low. It's not what you think. Oh, really? Ethan snapped. Because what I think is that you married my fiancé. Lila lifted her head. Her mascara streaked down her cheeks. It wasn't like that. Then how was it? Ethan demanded, his voice cracking. You were engaged to me. You were supposed to marry me tomorrow. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, she cried. It was an accident. I couldn't hold it anymore. The sound that tore out of me was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. An accident? You accidentally married my husband? Everyone froze. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. Lila's mouth opened, but no sound came out. I took a step closer, my voice shaking but rising with every word. You looked me in the eyes, Lila. You hugged me. You called me Mom. And the whole time you were sleeping with my husband? She burst into tears again, shaking her head violently. It wasn't like that, I swear. We didn't plan it, it just... David finally cut in, his tone sharp. That's enough, Lila. Ethan's face turned crimson. No, she's not done. I want to hear it. Every disgusting detail. I reached for him, but he stepped back. Don't, Mom. I need to hear it. Lila sobbed harder. It was before I met you, Ethan. Years ago. I didn't even know he had a son back then. My heart stopped. Before she met Ethan? David's shoulders tensed. He looked at the ground, his jaw locked. I whispered, What is she talking about, David? He didn't answer. Lila continued, her voice breaking. We met years ago. I was 19. I was working part-time and he helped me with something and it just happened. We got married at the courthouse. He said it was just on paper, that it didn't mean anything. The world tilted. I felt Margaret grab my arm again, but I barely registered it. My husband had secretly married a teenager, and that teenager had grown up to become my son's fiancé. Ethan stumbled backward, shaking his head like he was trying to wake up from a nightmare. No, that's not possible. Ethan, David said softly, taking a step toward him. I didn't know she was… Don't. Ethan's voice cracked like thunder. Don't you dare come near me! He turned to Lila, his eyes wild. And you knew this whole time? You knew who he was. She shook her head frantically. No, I didn't. I swear I didn't know until recently. Until recently? Ethan's voice broke. So, you knew before today, and you still went through with the wedding? Lila covered her face, sobbing uncontrollably. Ethan looked at me then, his eyes empty, his face pale. Mom, I can't do this. He turned and walked away from the church. Just like that. No goodbye, no look back, just gone. David took a step after him, but I moved in front of him. Don't, I said coldly. He froze. The woman he'd been married to for nearly 30 years was standing in front of him, shaking but unbroken. Don't you dare go after him, I whispered. You've done enough, Rosa, he said softly. Please, you have to understand. Understand? My voice rose. Understand what? That you married a girl barely older than your own son? That you let her fall in love with him without saying a word? I didn't know it was her, he shouted suddenly. Not until the engagement dinner. I didn't recognize her at first. And when I did, I panicked. I stared at him, my mouth open in disbelief. So you thought keeping quiet would make it better? He didn't answer. I laughed, a bitter, broken sound. You could have stopped all of this. You could have told me. You could have told him. I thought I could fix it quietly, he said weakly. I didn't want to lose you. I didn't want to lose our family. My chest burned. Then why did you throw it all away in the first place? He didn't have an answer. Father Matthew came out, his face pale and troubled. Perhaps everyone should go home for now, he said gently. This isn't the time or place. Margaret helped me toward the car, but I stopped once more at the church steps. Lila was still sitting there, her dress crumpled, her eyes hollow. Lila, I said quietly, you destroyed 2 men today. My husband and my son. She flinched, sobbing harder. I turned to David, my voice trembling but clear. And you destroyed me. Then I walked away. The sound of my heels against the church floor was the only thing I could hear. Each step echoed like a goodbye. The drive home was quiet, painfully quiet. The kind of silence that feels alive, like it's waiting to crush you if you breathe too loudly. Margaret kept glancing at me, but she didn't say much. She didn't have to. The look on her face said everything. Pity, shock, disbelief. When we pulled up to the house, I just sat there, staring at the porch light flickering faintly in the dusk. It felt strange to look at the place that used to mean safety. Now it was just walls that held too many lies. Margaret put a hand on mine. You don't have to go in there, Rosa. Not tonight. Come stay with me. I shook my head slowly. No, I need to see it. I need to face it. She sighed but didn't argue. At least let me come in with you. I nodded faintly. Together we walked up the steps, the wood creaking beneath us. The house smelled faintly of David's cologne, and that alone made my stomach turn. Everything looked exactly the same. The framed family photos, the vase of fading lilies from Lila's bridal shower, the wedding invitations still stacked neatly on the counter. But it all felt different now. Contaminated. I took a deep breath, then walked straight to our bedroom. His jacket was still hanging on the chair. His watch lay on the nightstand. The bed was made, but the sheets smelled like him, and suddenly I couldn't stand it. I grabbed a pillow and threw it across the room. Then another. Then the picture frame on the dresser, the one from our 25th anniversary. The glass shattered against the wall, the sound sharp and final. Margaret didn't stop me. She just stood in the doorway, letting me release it all. The rage, the grief, the humiliation. When I finally sank to the floor, my chest heaving, she knelt beside me and wrapped her arms around me. Rosa, she whispered, you didn't deserve any of this. I thought I knew him, I choked out. 30 years, Margaret. 30 years of my life, and he was capable of this? Her voice softened. You know what's worse? He didn't just betray you. He betrayed your son. There's no coming back from that. I nodded, tears running down my face. I know, hours passed. Margaret finally convinced me to eat something, barely a few bites of soup, before she left. Call me if he shows up, she said, her tone firm. And Rosa, don't let him talk you into forgiving him. He'll try. I didn't respond. When she left, the house was silent again. I turned off all the lights except one in the kitchen, then sat at the table with my hands around a cup of cold coffee. Every memory of David kept replaying. Our first date. His stupid jokes. The way he used to leave little notes on my nightstand. All of it blurred with the image of him standing in that church, silent while his son's fiancée cried. That image burned, and somewhere inside, something in me began to shift. The sound of a car engine outside snapped me back to reality. Headlights washed across the window. I froze. A door slammed, then another. My heart started to pound. I got up slowly, moving toward the window. When I peeked through the curtain, I saw David standing in the driveway, his shoulders slumped, his face lost in the dark. I locked the door before he even reached the porch. The knock came almost immediately. Rosa, please. Let me in. I stayed silent. Rosa, he said again, softer this time. We need to talk. The sound of his voice twisted something inside me, part anger, part heartbreak. There's nothing left to say, I called back through the door. You said it all when you kept your mouth shut today. I didn't mean for it to happen this way, he said. Please just open the door. Let me explain. Explain? I laughed bitterly. What's there to explain? That you married her? That you let your son fall in love with her? That you watched me welcome her into this house, call her family, and said nothing? He was quiet for a moment. Then softly, I didn't know how to tell you. I stepped closer to the door, my voice shaking but sharp. You don't keep something like that secret, David. You end it. You tell the truth. You don't let it destroy everyone around you. He sighed heavily. I know I've ruined everything. But Rosa, I swear it wasn't what you think. It was a stupid, impulsive decision. We barely even lived together. It was years ago I thought it was over. I never thought she'd come back into my life, into our lives like this. And you didn't think it mattered enough to tell me. Silence. David, I said quietly, go home. This is my home, he whispered. Not anymore. There was a long pause. Then, slowly, his footsteps retreated down the porch steps. I stood there until the sound of his car faded into the distance. Only then did I unlock the door, step outside, and breathe in the cold night air. The sky was clear, full of stars, bright and indifferent. I wrapped my arms around myself and whispered, You don't get to break me, but deep down, I wasn't sure if I believed it yet. The next morning, the headlines had already spread. Wedding rehearsal scandal. Groom's father secretly married bride. The entire town knew, and that's when the real nightmare began. By sunrise, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing, calls, texts, voicemails, all from friends, neighbors, even people I hadn't spoken to in years. Everyone wanted to check in, which really meant they wanted to know. Margaret had warned me. Small towns thrive on gossip. Rosa, they'll pick your bones clean if you let them. She was right. When I opened my front door to grab the morning paper, I froze. There it was, sprawled across the front page of the local paper. Wedding nightmare. Father already married to son's bride. My heart dropped. There was a blurry picture of me leaving the church, looking pale and broken, with David standing behind me, half turned away. The caption below read, Family scandal erupts at rehearsal. Sources say the mother collapsed in shock. Collapsed. No, I didn't collapse. I stood tall through hell, but that didn't matter. To the world, we were a circus now. I slammed the paper onto the counter just as Margaret called. Don't look online, she said immediately. I mean it, Rosa, don't. Why? What are they saying? People are sharing photos, making comments. calling it the wedding that never was. There's even a video clip of Father Matthew stopping the rehearsal. I sank into a chair, my head spinning. God, it's everywhere. I'm coming over, she said firmly. And Rosa, don't answer the door for anyone. You don't owe anyone your pain. A few minutes later, there was a knock anyway. I froze, expecting reporters. But when I opened the door, it wasn't strangers. It was Ethan. He looked ruined. His eyes were bloodshot, his jaw tight, his clothes wrinkled like he hadn't slept all night. Mom, he said softly. Can I come in? I nodded, stepping aside. He dropped onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. I drove all night. I went to Lila's apartment. She's gone. Gone? He nodded. Packed her things and disappeared. Her phone's off, her social media's deleted. It's like she vanished. I sat beside him, my voice gentle. Maybe that's for the best. He shook his head. No, I need to talk to her. I need to know why. Why she did this. Why Dad did this. Ethan, I don't understand. He suddenly shouted, slamming his fist into the couch cushion. How could he? How could she? She was supposed to be my wife, Mom. I grabbed his hands, forcing him to look at me. Listen to me, Ethan. None of this is your fault. None of it, his voice broke. Then why does it feel like it is? Because he was his father's son. Because the stain of that betrayal touched both of us. But I didn't say that. I just pulled him into a hug, and for the first time in years, he didn't resist. He cried quietly against my shoulder, the way he hadn't since he was a boy. When Margaret arrived, she took one look at us and didn't ask questions. She just made coffee and sat at the table, scrolling through her phone with that sharp, no-nonsense look she got when she was about to declare war. They're already digging, she said. Someone leaked court documents. They found the marriage record. Your husband and Lila's names on an old license from 8 years ago. 8 years? Ethan said, his voice hoarse. She was 19. I closed my eyes. The number hurt every time I heard it. Apparently they were married in another state, Margaret continued. No kids, no joint assets. Probably why it went unnoticed. But there's no record of a divorce, Ethan laughed bitterly. So technically, she is still his wife. That silence that followed was suffocating. The next few days blurred into one long nightmare. The phone kept ringing. Reporters even parked down the street. Every time I stepped outside, I felt eyes watching. David hadn't contacted me since that night, until the 5th day. A single text lit up my phone. We need to talk, please. It's not what you think. I stared at the screen for a long time before deleting it. Margaret saw and nodded approvingly. Good, let him stew. But Ethan wasn't as calm. You should talk to him, he said quietly. I need answers, Mom. I can't move on without knowing why he did this. He'll twist it, I warned. He'll make excuses. He always does. I know, he said. But I still need to hear it from him. That night I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the house made me jump. The fridge humming, the floorboards creaking, the wind brushing against the windows. My mind kept looping through the same thought. They're already married. The priest's voice echoed like a curse. Around midnight, I finally gave up and went downstairs for water. As I passed the living room, I saw Ethan standing at the window, staring into the dark. Couldn't sleep either, I asked softly. He didn't look at me. I keep thinking about the wedding. How excited I was. How proud Dad looked. He gave a small, bitter laugh. Guess I didn't realize what that smile really meant. I walked closer. Ethan, don't let this define you. You're not him. He turned to me then, eyes full of something I hadn't seen before. Cold determination. I know, but I'm not done with him either. A chill ran down my spine. What do you mean? He looked away, his voice low. He doesn't get to walk away from this. Not after what he did to you. To me. Ethan. But he was already heading upstairs, leaving me alone in the dim light. I stood there for a long time, the weight of everything pressing down on me. One thought repeating in my head. This wasn't over. Not for any of us. Morning crept into the house quietly, pale sunlight spilling across the floor like nothing had happened. I envied the light for that, how it could enter any space, no matter how broken, and make it look whole again. But nothing in that house was whole anymore. Ethan was gone when I woke up. His room was empty, bed still unmade, his car missing from the driveway. Panic shot through me. I called his phone immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. "Ethan, it's Mom. Please call me back. I just want to know where you are." I waited, pacing by the window, watching the road like I could summon him by staring long enough. Margaret texted asking if I'd heard from him. I typed back no but didn't hit send. Somehow, putting it into words made it feel real. Then the doorbell rang. I hesitated before answering. For a second, I imagined reporters again. But when I opened the door, it was him. David. He looked awful. His eyes sunken, his shirt wrinkled, his face covered in a few days' worth of stubble. "Rosa," he said softly, "please let me in. Just for 5 minutes." Every part of me screamed to slam the door, but then I remembered Ethan's words. I need answers. I stepped aside. 5 minutes. That's all. He nodded and walked in like a stranger in his own house. He looked around the living room, the couch, the framed photos, the empty coffee mug I'd left on the table, and sighed. "It still smells like home." "Don't," I said quietly. "You don't get to call it that anymore." He nodded again, defeated. "Fair enough." He sat down, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. "I know you don't owe me anything, Rosa. I don't expect forgiveness. I want to explain before Ethan does something stupid." My stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" He hesitated. "He came to see me last night." I felt my blood run cold. "He what?" "At the motel," he said. "He found out where I was staying. He came pounding on my door at 2 a.m. He was furious. I thought he was going to hit me. I swallowed hard. What did he say? That he never wanted to see me again. That he wished I'd died before he found out the truth." David's voice cracked slightly, and I can't blame him for that. I broke him. For a brief moment, I saw the man I used to love. Exhausted, broken, ashamed. But I couldn't let myself feel sorry for him. "You didn't just break him," I said. "You broke all of us," he nodded. "I know. And I hate myself for it every day." I sat down across from him. "So tell me everything, all of it." "No lies this time." He took a deep breath. "It started 9 years ago. I was out of town for work, a long project in Denver. I was lonely, stupid, and angry at the world. You and I were barely talking then. Because you were never home," I interrupted. He winced. "Right. I met Lila at a diner. She was 19, working part-time. I didn't know how young she was until later. We started talking, then meeting up. It was supposed to be nothing. But she got evicted and I helped her find a place. Then one night she said we should get married. She thought it would help her with financial aid and her lease. I thought it was ridiculous, but she was desperate and I didn't think it mattered. It was just a piece of paper. I didn't even use my real address." My stomach churned. "You married her to help with rent?" He nodded weakly. "It wasn't real. I never saw her again after that summer. I assumed it was dissolved automatically," I scoffed. "You assumed." "I forgot about it, Rosa. Completely. Until Ethan brought her home. The moment I saw her, I knew. She'd changed her last name, her hair, everything. But I recognized her eyes." "So you knew from the beginning," I said slowly. He hesitated. "Not the very beginning. But after the engagement party, yes. And I didn't know how to stop it without destroying him. I kept waiting for the right time." I laughed bitterly. "The right time? You had a year. You let it go until a priest had to stop the wedding." "I know," he said quietly. "I deserve every bit of this. But Rosa, I swear to you, it wasn't romantic. It wasn't love. It was a stupid, meaningless mistake that came back to haunt me." I stared at him for a long moment. "And yet, it's the kind of mistake that ruins lives." Before either of us could say another word, the front door opened. Ethan stepped in. His hair was messy, his eyes red, his shoulders tense. He froze when he saw his father sitting on the couch. "What are you doing here?" he asked coldly. "I came to talk," David said softly. "To explain—" "Explain?" Ethan's voice rose. "You think anything can explain what you did?" "Ethan, please, no!" He slammed his hand against the wall, making both of us flinch. "You don't get to say please." "You ruined everything! You married a teenager and then let me fall in love with her." David stood. "I didn't know, son." "I swear to you, don't call me that!" The room went still. Ethan's chest was heaving, tears streaking his face. "You're not my father anymore." For a second, David looked like he'd been punched in the gut. His eyes went glossy, his mouth opening and closing with no words coming out. Then he turned to me, voice breaking. "Take care of him, Rosa." He walked to the door, hesitating for just a heartbeat before leaving. The door clicked shut behind him, and Ethan collapsed into the nearest chair, burying his face in his hands. "I don't know how to hate him and miss him at the same time," he whispered. I knelt beside him, wrapping my arms around him as tightly as I could. "Then don't decide today. Just breathe. We'll figure it out one day at a time." Outside, I could hear David's car engine fade down the street, and though I didn't know it yet, that would be the last time we ever saw him as the man we used to know. The next morning felt like the first day of a new life, one I never asked for. The house was too quiet. The smell of David's cologne had faded from the hallway, replaced by the faint scent of cleaning spray and cold coffee. Ethan was still asleep on the couch, his face buried in a blanket, the same one he used to drag around as a kid when he was scared of thunderstorms. I watched him for a while, heart heavy. How do you protect your child from a pain like this? From the kind of betrayal that reshapes who they are? When I finally sat at the kitchen table, Margaret was already calling. "I'm coming over," she said before I could even say hello. "And I'm bringing muffins because God knows neither of you has eaten properly in days." I smiled weakly. "You don't have to—" "Rosa," she interrupted. "After everything that's come out, I think you deserve a muffin." She hung up before I could argue. By the time she arrived, Ethan was awake, staring blankly at the TV that wasn't even on. Margaret walked in with her usual whirlwind of energy, placing the bag on the counter. "You both look like ghosts," she said, pulling out blueberry muffins. "Eat now, I'll handle coffee." Ethan gave a tired smirk. "Aunt Margaret, you sound like a drill sergeant." "Good," she said. "Maybe if I bark loud enough, we'll forget that your father is the world's biggest idiot." Ethan gave a small laugh, the first sound of life I'd heard from him in days. Once everyone had eaten something, Margaret turned serious. "So, what's next?" I hesitated. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she said, folding her arms, "you can't just sit here forever. The papers, the gossip, the mess, it's not going away on its own. You have to make a move, Rosa." "I'm not sure I have the energy for another war," I murmured. Margaret leaned forward. "Then let me be blunt. If you don't speak your side, the world will write it for you. And trust me, they'll make you the villain." Ethan looked up. "She's right, Mom. People are already twisting it online. They're saying Lila was tricked, that she didn't know he was married." I laughed bitterly. "Oh, so now she's the victim." "Exactly," Margaret said. "You can't let that narrative stick. You need to tell your story before they bury you under his lies." Her words sank deep. I'd spent my entire life avoiding drama, staying quiet, keeping the peace. But peace had been a luxury, one David had already stolen from me. Maybe it was time to stop protecting everyone else. That afternoon, I sat at my desk with a blank document open on my laptop. My hands hovered over the keyboard for a long time before I began to type. I didn't know if I was writing a statement, a confession, or a scream. But the words came pouring out anyway. My name is Rosa Reynolds. You may have seen the headlines about my family. What they don't tell you is the truth. The pain, the betrayal, the silence we were forced to keep for years. I wrote for hours, each sentence carving a piece of the hurt out of me. By the time I finished, my eyes were burning and my hands were trembling, but for the first time, I felt lighter. Ethan came into the room just as I hit save. "What's that?" he asked. "My story," I said simply. Ours. The next day, I posted it. Not to the gossip sites, not to social media, but to a quiet blog I'd made years ago, one where I used to share recipes and family photos. This time it became my way of reclaiming the narrative. Within hours, the views started climbing. Hundreds. Then thousands. People started commenting, not with pity, but with understanding. You're so strong. Thank you for speaking out. He doesn't deserve your silence. It was strange, watching strangers defend me when the people closest to me had destroyed me. Margaret texted me 3 words that made me smile. You're trending, honey. Later that evening, while I was washing dishes, Ethan came into the kitchen holding his phone. Mom, you should see this. He showed me a message from an unknown number. Lila, I read your post. I'm sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. My grip on the sponge tightened. She has no right. Wait, Ethan said quietly. There's more. Another message appeared. Lila. I didn't even know I was still married. He told me it was annulled years ago. I looked at Ethan. Do you believe her? He didn't answer right away. I don't know. Part of me wants to, but part of me can't. Then trust the part that's protecting you, I said softly. He nodded, locking his phone. That night, as I sat by the window with a cup of tea, I saw headlights flash across the street. My stomach tensed. A car had stopped just outside the house. It wasn't Margaret's. It wasn't Ethan's friends. And when the driver stepped out, I froze. Lila. She stood on the sidewalk, clutching a small box in her hands, her face pale and hollow in the streetlight. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then she whispered, just loud enough for me to hear through the glass. I need to talk to you, Mrs. Reynolds. Please. I didn't open the door. Not yet. But my heart started pounding again, not with rage this time, but with something colder. Because after everything that had happened, I wasn't sure what terrified me more. What she might say. Or what she might reveal next. Lila stood frozen on my porch like a ghost who'd lost her way home. The porch light flickered above her, casting shadows across her tear-streaked face. In her hands, that small box trembled like it carried the weight of the world. I didn't open the door immediately. I just stared at her through the window, heart thudding, brain spinning. Every memory of her came crashing back, the way she used to smile at Ethan, the way she hugged me when she first called me Mom, the way she looked at my husband like he was just another parent in the room. But now I knew better. I slowly unlocked the door and opened it just enough to see her clearly. What do you want, Lila? Her voice cracked. Just a few minutes, please. The air between us was thick with history and silence. I studied her for a long moment before stepping aside. 5 minutes. She nodded quickly and stepped in. The house was dim except for the kitchen light. Her eyes darted around like she expected to see David lurking in a corner. When she realized he wasn't there, her shoulders loosened slightly. She placed the box on the table and whispered, I came to give you this. I crossed my arms. What is it? Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were papers, old, yellowed, crumpled. Marriage documents, photos, and one folded letter. I didn't know, she said quietly. Not until everything happened. I swear I didn't know he was still married to me. I didn't say anything, she went on, her words tumbling over themselves. He told me it was annulled. He said it was just a formality, something he did to help with rent. He said he never even used his real address. I never saw him again after that summer. I thought it was done. Until you met my son, I said coldly. Her eyes filled with tears. Yes, when Ethan proposed, I didn't even make the connection. I didn't remember his last name and I never saw a photo of him. But when I met your husband, she swallowed, voice shaking. I saw the look in his eyes, and I knew. I gripped the back of a chair. And you said nothing? I tried, she whispered. I tried to end it. I told him we couldn't do this, that it wasn't right. But he told me he'd fix it. He said the annulment papers just hadn't been filed properly. I believed him. I thought he was handling it. I let out a bitter laugh. Handling it? That's what he always said when he was lying. Her tears spilled over now. Mrs. Reynolds, I didn't mean to hurt you. I loved Ethan, I still do. But I couldn't marry him knowing what I knew. That's why I told the priest before the rehearsal. I thought if I said it out loud, maybe it would finally end. My throat tightened. You should have told me. I know, she said softly. But you were kind to me. You treated me like family. I couldn't face you. Her honesty hit me like a weight. I wanted to hate her, but looking at her now, shaking, hollow-eyed, barely holding herself together, I saw someone who'd been used just like me. Why come here now? I asked. She pushed the letter toward me. Because of this. I hesitated before picking it up. It was addressed to her, written in David's handwriting. I unfolded it slowly. Lila, if you're reading this, it means I failed to fix what I started. I never wanted this to reach Rosa or Ethan. I didn't mean to ruin anyone's life. You were young, scared, and I should have known better. I thought I could handle it quietly, but lies have a way of growing teeth. Please forgive me. Tell Rosa the truth if I can't. She deserves it more than I do. David. I stared at the letter until the words blurred. He had written it. Knowing this day might come. Lila wiped her face with the back of her hand. I didn't know what to do with it. I couldn't keep it anymore. I thought you should have it. I folded the letter carefully, sliding it back into the box. Thank you, I said quietly. But this doesn't change what he did. She nodded, tears spilling again. I know. I just needed you to know that I didn't lie. Not to you, not to Ethan. The sound of footsteps behind us made us both turn. Ethan was standing in the doorway, his face pale, eyes locked on Lila. Ethan, I whispered. How long have you been there? Long enough, he said flatly. Lila froze. Ethan, don't, he said, his voice cracking. Just don't. You had so many chances to tell me. To tell either of us. And you let me walk down that aisle like an idiot. She stepped toward him, but he stepped back. I didn't know how to. Then you should have figured it out, he shouted. You let my father destroy everything, and you stood there and said nothing. Her face crumpled. I'm sorry, Ethan. I'm so sorry. He turned away, his voice breaking. You should go. Lila hesitated for a long moment, then nodded. She looked at me one last time, whispered thank you, and walked out the door. The sound of her car driving away echoed down the street like the final page of a painful chapter. Ethan sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. I thought I hated her, he murmured. But now I just don't know. I sat beside him, placing the folded letter on the table. Maybe that's okay, I said softly. You don't have to decide what to feel today. Just know you're not alone, he nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. What are we supposed to do now? I looked at the box, the photos, the marriage papers, the confession. Now, I said, taking a deep breath. We finish what he started. We get it all annulled properly this time, and then we start over. Both of us. He lifted his head, eyes red. Start over? Yes, I said more firmly this time. Because this story doesn't end with him? It ends with us choosing peace over his lies. Outside, the sun began to rise, painting the kitchen in gold. And for the first time since the wedding rehearsal, I felt something like hope again. The following week felt like walking through a battlefield after the smoke cleared, quiet, but heavy with the wreckage left behind. Every phone call, every curious glance from neighbors, every whisper at the grocery store was a reminder that the scandal wasn't done with us yet. Ethan had gone back to work, or at least he tried to. His co-workers didn't make it easy. The small-town gossip mill was ruthless. I could see it in his face when he came home every evening. Exhaustion, anger, shame. I tried to distract myself with simple things, cleaning, cooking, writing. But the quiet moments never stayed quiet for long. That box Lila had brought sat on the counter like a wound that wouldn't close. One evening, while washing dishes, I finally decided to go through it properly. There were receipts, old photos, and a few letters. all addressed to different people. Some looked recent, others old. But one envelope caught my attention. It was addressed to a law firm in Denver. I frowned. Inside was a copy of the original marriage certificate, with David's signature clear as day. But what made my stomach drop wasn't the date. It was the witness's name. Samuel N. Reynolds, my brother-in-law. I gripped the paper tightly. Samuel had been at our wedding. He'd toasted us, laughed with us, and helped David build his business. He knew. The next morning, I called him. He answered on the second ring. "Rosa, hey, it's been a while." "Cut the small talk, Sam," I said sharply. "I found your name on David's marriage certificate to Lila." There was a pause, long, tense, heavy. "Rosa." "Listen, it's not what you think." I laughed bitterly. "Oh, isn't it? Because it looks exactly like you signed as witness to your brother's second marriage while he was still married to me." He sighed. "It was complicated." "No, Sam," I snapped. "It was deceit. You could have stopped him. You could have told me. But you didn't." He lowered his voice. "I didn't think it was real, Rosa. He told me it was a fake ceremony. A legal loophole for some girl who needed help. I didn't even think it counted." "Didn't count?" I repeated, incredulous. "Do you hear yourself?" He went silent again, then finally said, "If I could take it back, I would. But you know how David was. He always had a way of convincing people." "Yeah," I said bitterly, until his lies caught up to him. After the call, I sat in the living room, the letter still trembling in my hand. It was strange, how even after death, David managed to shake our world with secrets. Margaret came by that afternoon and found me staring at the document. "Still digging through the skeleton closet?" she asked gently. "Turns out," I said quietly, "there's more skeletons than closet." I handed her the paper. She read it and let out a low whistle. "So his brother knew?" "Apparently. Signed the papers himself." Margaret crossed her arms. "You know what that means, right?" I frowned. "What?" "He's part of the cover-up. You could go after him legally." I hesitated. The thought hadn't even crossed my mind. "Margaret, I'm tired. I don't want another fight." She leaned forward. "Rosa, this isn't about revenge. It's about closure. You deserve to end this story on your terms. Make them face what they did." I stared at the document again, and something inside me hardened. She was right. David had lied. Leela had stayed silent. But Samuel had enabled it, and I was done being quiet. The next day, I drove to the courthouse. Ethan offered to come, but I told him no. This was something I had to do alone. The clerk's office was cold and sterile, the kind of place that smelled faintly of paper and old coffee. I filled out the forms with shaking hands, petition for annulment, request for investigation into fraudulent marriage filings. Each signature felt like sealing the final chapter of a life I no longer recognized. When I handed the papers to the clerk, she looked at me with polite sympathy. "It'll take a few weeks to process," she said. "That's fine," I replied. "I've waited 9 years for the truth. I can wait a little longer." That evening, when I came home, Ethan was sitting on the porch steps, scrolling through his phone. He looked up. "Mom, did you see this?" He handed me his phone. A local news site had picked up my story from the blog. Only this time, the headline read, "Wife of local businessman exposes secret marriage scandal. Family demands justice." There were hundreds of comments, most supportive, some cruel. Ethan grinned faintly. "They're calling you a hero." I shook my head. "I'm no hero. I'm just tired of being quiet." "Still," he said softly, "Dad would have hated this." "Good," I replied. For a moment, we both laughed. An unexpected, shaky, human sound that cut through the heaviness. But the peace didn't last long. 2 nights later, I got an email. No sender name, just a strange address. The subject line read, "You don't know the whole story." I hesitated before clicking it. Inside was a single sentence. "David wasn't lying about everything. Check the storage unit on Maple Street." There was no signature, no clue who it came from, just that one cryptic line. My heart pounded as I stared at the screen. Who sent it? Why now? And what could possibly be left to find? The email haunted me all night. I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the words looping through my mind like a whisper I couldn't shut out. Check the storage unit on Maple Street. I hadn't even known David had one. But the thing was, he'd always been good at hiding things. Small things, big things, entire lives. By morning, I'd made up my mind. When I walked into the kitchen, Ethan was already there, scrolling through his phone with a cup of coffee. His eyes were heavy but alert. He looked like he'd been awake all night, too. Couldn't sleep either? I asked. He shook his head. Not after that email. You think it's real? I don't know, I said, sitting across from him. But we can't ignore it. He hesitated. You sure it's safe? No, I said plainly. But since when has anything about this been safe? The storage facility on Maple Street was on the edge of town. Old, quiet, the kind of place people used when they wanted to hide something, not store it. Rows of rusting metal doors stretched under a gray sky. The office smelled of stale coffee and dust. A balding man in his 60s looked up from behind the counter. Can I help you? I pulled out my ID and David's old business card. I'm Rosa Reynolds. My husband, David Reynolds, might have had a unit here. I need access to it. He frowned, typing on his computer. David Reynolds. Yeah, here we are. Unit 43B. Been rented since 2016. Payment stopped 3 months ago. 3 months ago. Around the time everything fell apart. He squinted at the screen. Says he used his business name on the lease, not personal. Do you have proof you're next of kin? I handed him David's death certificate and marriage license. My hands trembled as I did. He nodded, made a copy, and handed me a key. Third row on the left. You can take as long as you need. Ethan and I walked through the rows of units in silence, the sound of our footsteps echoing off the concrete. Do you think it's just old work stuff? He asked quietly. Maybe, I said. Or maybe it's the part of him we never saw. We stopped at the faded blue door marked 43B. The metal was cold under my hand as I unlocked it. The door creaked open. Inside was darkness and the faint smell of old paper. Ethan switched on his phone flashlight. The beam swept across boxes stacked to the ceiling, a few old pieces of furniture, and a filing cabinet against the far wall. Looks like an archive, he muttered. I stepped inside slowly, my heart hammering. The air felt heavier the deeper I went. We started opening boxes. Old business receipts, files from his construction company, tax records. Nothing strange. But then Ethan pulled a small box from the back corner. It was labeled in David's handwriting, Private, Do Not Open. He looked at me. Do we? Yes, I said immediately. He opened it carefully. Inside were photos. Dozens of them. Me, Ethan, family dinners, vacations, Christmas mornings, and then Lila in Denver. Lila in a diner. Lila smiling beside David. Ethan froze. He kept pictures of her? I nodded slowly, my stomach turning. From years ago? Before she even met you. Ethan dropped the photo like it burned him. Unbelievable. I sifted through the rest. But something at the bottom caught my eye. A sealed envelope with my name on it. Rosa. The handwriting was unmistakable. My hands trembled as I tore it open. Rosa, if you found this, it means the truth has come out. Maybe not the way I wanted, but it always does. I kept this because I needed you to know something I couldn't say in person. I didn't fall in love with Lila. I pitied her. She reminded me of you when we were young, scared, trying to make ends meet, trusting people she shouldn't. I helped her, but I crossed lines I shouldn't have. By the time I realized it, it was too late. I never stopped loving you. I was just too much of a coward to tell you the truth when it mattered. You deserved honesty, Rosa, not this mess. But if you're reading this, please don't let my mistakes ruin what's left of your life. You're stronger than I ever was. David, by the time I finished reading, my vision blurred. Ethan was watching me carefully. What does it say? I handed him the letter. He read it silently, jaw tightening. So that's it? That's supposed to make it okay? No, I whispered. It doesn't make it okay, but it gives us closure, he shook his head. It's too late for closure. Maybe, I said softly. But not for peace. We spent another hour going through the unit, packing the letters and documents into a box. As we left, I took one last look inside, at all the years of secrets, stacked neatly and hidden behind a metal door. It felt strange, walking away. Like burying someone twice. Outside, the sky had cleared. The air was cool, crisp, cleansing. Ethan carried the box to the car. What do we do with all this? I looked at the stack of letters, photos, evidence of a life built on lies. We burn it, I said. All of it. It ends tonight. He glanced at me, surprised. You sure? Yes, I said firmly. No more ghosts. That night, we lit a small fire pit in the backyard. One by one, we fed the papers to the flames, the photos, the documents, the letters. The fire crackled, warm and fierce. Ethan stood beside me in silence. The orange glow reflected in his eyes. When the last paper turned to ash, I whispered, "Goodbye, David." And for the first time, I meant it. Ethan slipped his arm around me. You did the right thing, Mom. I smiled faintly, watching the last ember fade into the night. No, I said quietly. We did. Later, after Ethan went inside, I stayed out a little longer, staring at the stars. Somewhere, in the quiet between the rustling trees, I felt something loosen inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet. But release, and maybe that was enough for now. The ashes from last night still sat in the fire pit like a grave. A quiet, smoldering end to years of betrayal and silence. I stood by the window, watching the morning sunlight glint over the blackened remnants, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel anger. Just exhaustion, and maybe a little peace. Ethan walked into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. Morning, he said, his voice rough. I smiled faintly. Morning. He poured himself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter. So, now what? Now, I said, we live. Without lies. Without pretending. He nodded, but his gaze lingered on the backyard. Feels strange, doesn't it? Like he's still here somehow. He will be, I said quietly, for a while. But we'll outgrow the ghost of him. We sat together for a while, drinking our coffee in silence. Then my phone buzzed, a notification from my blog. I frowned and opened it. Another comment, but this one was different. You think you know everything, but David wasn't the only one hiding something. Check your own past, Rosa. My stomach tightened. Spam? Ethan asked. I shook my head. It doesn't look like it. The message didn't come from a username, just anonymous. For a few minutes, I just sat there, rereading the comment. The words felt too deliberate, too personal. Someone's trying to mess with you, Ethan said. You should ignore it. But I couldn't. Because deep down I knew secrets had a way of lingering, no matter how many fires you burned them in. That afternoon I went out for a walk. I needed air, space to think. The neighborhood was quiet, but people still stared when I passed. Their smiles were polite but strained. I could almost hear the whispers. That's her. The one from the wedding scandal. I didn't care anymore. Let them talk. But when I turned the corner toward the park, a familiar voice called my name. Rosa? I froze. It was Samuel. David's brother. He looked older than I remembered. Hollow-eyed, shoulders slumped, a man carrying his own guilt. Sam, I said flatly. What are you doing here? He sighed. I saw the article. I figured you'd hate me, and I wouldn't blame you. But I had to tell you something before you found out the wrong way. Found out what? He glanced around nervously. Can we talk somewhere private? I crossed my arms. Say it here. He rubbed his face, hesitating. There's more to the Denver trip. David wasn't just working on a construction project. He was covering for someone. Covering for who? I asked, my patience thinning. He met my eyes, guilt written across his face. For me, the air went cold. What are you talking about? He took a shaky breath. That night, when he met Lila at the diner, she wasn't supposed to meet him. She was supposed to meet me. My chest tightened. What? She answered an ad I put out for a rental unit, he continued quickly. We started talking, and I liked her, but when I realized how young she was, I backed off. David found out and told me I was being reckless. He said he'd handle it, make sure she was okay, get her settled. He promised not to tell you because he didn't want you to think less of me. I stared at him, speechless. So you're saying, I whispered, that the entire chain of events, the meeting, the marriage, the lies, started because of you? He nodded, his eyes wet. I didn't mean for it to go that far. I thought he was just helping her find a place to live. I didn't know he'd marry her. I stepped back, shaking my head. You let me believe it was all his doing. You watched me crumble. You stood there and said nothing. I was ashamed, he said, voice breaking. By the time I realized how bad it had gotten, it was too late. And after he died, I thought, what's the point? He's gone. Why dig it all back up? Because I'm still here, I snapped. Ethan's still here. We're the ones who had to live with it. He lowered his head. I know. And I'm sorry, Rosa, I really am. I didn't say another word. I just turned and walked away. When I got home, Ethan was in the living room. I must have looked pale because he immediately asked, what happened? I told him everything. When I finished, he just sat there, silent for a long time. Then he said softly, so Uncle Sam started all of this. Indirectly, I said bitterly. But yes, he shook his head. This family is cursed. No, I said, sitting beside him. Just human. Terribly, stupidly human. He gave a sad little laugh. Guess we're the cleanup crew for everyone else's mistakes. Maybe, I said. But at least we're honest about it. Later that night, I deleted the anonymous comment from my blog. But before I closed my laptop, I opened a new draft. Truth doesn't end when you think you've found it. It grows, it branches, and sometimes it turns back on you. But maybe that's what healing really is. Not pretending the past didn't happen, but refusing to let it own you anymore. I saved it, but didn't publish. Not yet. Some truths were meant to rest quietly, not explode online. When I looked up, Ethan was standing in the doorway, smiling faintly. You're writing again, he said. Yeah, I replied softly. This time, for me. Outside, the wind picked up, scattering the ashes in the fire pit. And just like that, what was left of David finally drifted away. The next few days passed in uneasy silence. The air in the house felt different, lighter in some ways, but full of new questions I didn't want to ask. Samuel's confession had stirred something in me I thought I'd buried with the ashes. For so long, I'd painted David as the villain of the story, and he was. But now the lines were blurring. His betrayal was still unforgivable, yet beneath it was a twisted act of protection for his brother. It didn't make him innocent, but it made him human. And that was harder to hate. Ethan didn't talk about it much. He spent most of his time at work or in his room. When we did cross paths, we'd exchange small talk, safe. Simple things that didn't risk reopening wounds. But one evening, as we were clearing the dinner table, he finally spoke. Do you think Dad ever really loved you? He asked quietly. The question hit like a punch. I took a moment before answering. I think he loved the version of me he wanted me to be. Ethan frowned. What does that mean? It means he loved the woman who never argued, who forgave easily, who made excuses for him. But I'm not her anymore. He nodded, eyes down. Good, because I don't think that version of you would have survived this. That made me smile, a small, tired smile. You're right. Later that night, I sat at my desk staring at the folder of old family photos I hadn't deleted yet. Every image felt like a lie now. David's arm around me, his smile. Our perfect little family frozen in moments that didn't deserve to be remembered that way. And then, tucked between two photos, I found a letter. It wasn't sealed. The handwriting was mine. I unfolded it and realized what it was. A letter I'd written years ago but never sent. The date in the corner read, March 2014. Back when David had gone on another one of his business trips. The letter read, David, I don't know who you are anymore. You come home with smiles and flowers, but your eyes are somewhere else. You talk to me, but I can feel the walls you've built between us. I tell myself it's work, it's stress, it's the years. But sometimes I wonder if it's me. Maybe I stopped being someone worth coming home to. If there's something you're not telling me, please, just tell me. Don't make me feel like a stranger in my own marriage. Rosa, I stared at the page, my own handwriting trembling from the memory of how scared I must have been when I wrote it. The truth was, I'd known something was wrong all along. I just hadn't wanted to see it. The next morning, I took the letter to the backyard, lit a match, and watched it burn. The paper curled and blackened, the ink turning to smoke. I whispered softly to the flame, "You don't own me anymore." As the ashes floated away, I felt something inside me lift. Not gone, but lighter. Around noon, Margaret showed up with her usual energy and zero warning. "All right," she said, marching into the living room. "You've been cooped up long enough." "We're going out," I blinked. "Out where?" She grinned. "Anywhere that doesn't smell like regret." "Margaret." "No arguments," she said, grabbing my purse. "We're getting lunch. And maybe dessert. Possibly a drink. Or 5. I couldn't help but laugh. "You're impossible." "Exactly," she said. "Now come on, Rosa. You've spent months digging through other people's messes. Time to live a little." We went to a small cafe downtown, one I used to visit before life became a storm. The sunlight poured through the windows, the scent of coffee and sugar filling the air. As we sat down, Margaret leaned in. "So, you've burned the letters, buried the past, exposed the truth. What's next?" I stirred my coffee. "I honestly don't know," she smirked. "That's a good start. What do you mean?" "Not knowing means you're finally free to choose," she said. "No more reacting to what they did. Now it's about what you want." Her words stuck with me. For so long, my life had revolved around damage control, keeping the family together, fixing what David broke, protecting Ethan from the fallout. I hadn't thought about what I wanted in years. "What if I don't know who I am without all this?" I admitted quietly. Margaret reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Then it's time to find out." That night I sat outside again watching the stars. The air was cool, calm, the world quieter somehow. Ethan joined me after a while, sitting beside me on the porch steps. "Margaret says I should take a trip," I said. He smiled faintly. "You should. You deserve it. What about you?" He shrugged. "Maybe I'll start looking for jobs outside town. Somewhere new." I looked at him, realizing for the first time how grown he really was. The boy who once needed me for everything now needed to leave to heal. And maybe that was okay. "I think that's a good idea," I said softly. We sat there for a while, neither of us speaking, just the two of us watching the sky, the way we used to when David was gone on business trips. But this time, there was no pretending, no waiting, no ache for someone who'd never come home. There was just peace. Before bed, I checked my blog again. Dozens of new messages filled the inbox, strangers sharing their own stories of betrayal, survival, forgiveness. And for the first time, I replied, "Healing isn't forgetting. It's remembering without bleeding." I hit send, then I closed the laptop, turned off the light, and whispered to the dark, "I'm still here." And this time, that felt like enough. The following week, the house started to feel different. Not haunted anymore, just quiet in a way that felt almost peaceful. For months, every sound had been heavy with memory. The kettle's whistle, the creak in the hallway, the hum of the refrigerator at night. But now those sounds simply existed. I'd started leaving the windows open again. The air moved through the house freely, carrying laughter from the street, the scent of fresh rain, and the kind of sunlight that made dust shimmer like something holy. Ethan had been keeping busy, maybe too busy. He'd taken extra shifts at work and started spending more time out with friends. I didn't pry. I knew the pattern. When someone's world cracks, they fill the silence with motion. Anything to drown out the echo of what was lost. Still, there was one evening he came home late, and I noticed a new look in his eyes, softer, nervous. He hovered near the kitchen like he wanted to say something. "Everything okay?" I asked. He hesitated, then smiled shyly. "Yeah, actually. I've been seeing someone." I paused mid-sip of tea. "Oh?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "Her name's Clara. We met at work. She knows about everything. About Dad, the wedding, all of it. But she doesn't treat me like I'm broken." I smiled, warmth blooming in my chest. "That's a good sign," he chuckled. "I'm trying not to rush it. I don't want to repeat his mistakes." "You won't," I said firmly. "You already learned the hardest lesson." He looked down, voice quiet. "What lesson's that?" "That love without honesty doesn't survive," I said. "And pretending always costs more than the truth." He nodded, and for the first time in a long while, I saw a little light come back into his eyes. Over the next few weeks, I started rebuilding my own life too, quietly, cautiously. I took Margaret's advice and signed up for a pottery class at the community center. It felt strange at first, my hands clumsy and unsure. But as the clay spun beneath my fingers, I found something I hadn't felt in years: stillness. The instructor, a gentle older man named Henry, watched me struggle one afternoon and said, "Don't fight it. Clay remembers how you treat it. If you force it, it breaks. If you guide it, it follows." His words sank deeper than I wanted to admit. By the end of the session, I had made something small but whole, a simple vase. A little uneven, a little imperfect, but entirely mine. When I brought it home, I placed it on the mantel where our old wedding photo used to sit. It didn't erase the past, but it replaced it. One morning, as I was tending to my garden, the mailman handed me a thick envelope. No return address. Inside was a letter, typed, cold. "Mrs. Reynolds, you don't know me, but I knew your husband. He was a client of mine years ago. I thought you'd want to know that before he died, David had started a charitable fund. Money he never told anyone about. It's still active, held in trust. His instructions were vague, but it seems he wanted it to go to whoever he hurt the most." I froze. At the bottom of the letter was a name: Law Offices of Morton and Clive, Denver. I folded it slowly, my mind racing. Whoever he hurt the most. Was that me? Ethan, Lila, or was it all of us? That evening, I told Ethan about the letter. He stared at it for a long time, then looked at me. "Do you want to claim it?" I shook my head. "No. Money can't heal what he broke." "Then what do you want to do with it?" I thought about that all night. By morning, the answer came. I called the number on the letter and arranged for the funds to be released, not to me, but as a scholarship in Lila's name, for young women who needed housing support and education assistance. It felt right, not forgiveness, but closure in a language David would have understood. Redemption through action. A week later, Margaret stopped by for lunch. When I told her about the scholarship, she blinked at me in disbelief. "You're a better woman than I'll ever be," she said. I smiled faintly. "No, just one who's done being angry." She raised her glass of iced tea. "To peace, then?" "To peace," I said, clinking mine against hers. That night, I sat on the porch again, watching the stars. The air was cool, soft, alive. Ethan texted me a photo. Him and Clara at a small cafe, smiling. The message underneath read, "She makes me feel safe again." "Thank you, Mom." Tears pricked my eyes, but they were warm ones this time. I looked up at the night sky, whispered softly, "We're okay now, David. You can rest." The wind stirred, gentle and quiet, as if answering. Then I went inside, turned off the lights, and for the first time in years, slept without dreams. 6 months passed. The sharp edges of the past began to soften, like sea glass smoothed by the tide. Life was quieter now, gentler. The town had moved on to newer scandals, the gossip fading into distant memory. My name no longer appeared in whispers or pitying looks at the grocery store. People smiled again when they saw me, not the forced smiles of sympathy, but the easy kind that said, "We remember you before all that." I had become something I never expected. Free. The scholarship program launched in the spring. The first recipient, a young woman named Naomi, came to visit me one afternoon after class. She was nervous, clutching her backpack, eyes full of that same fragile hope I remembered in Lila all those years ago. "Mrs. Reynolds," she said softly, "I just wanted to thank you. I was going to drop out of school. I didn't have rent money, and then this happened." "You changed everything," I smiled. "No, dear. You changed it. You just needed someone to hold the door open." When she left, I sat on the porch for a long while, thinking about how something born out of betrayal had turned into a small, good thing. David would have never imagined it ending this way. Maybe that was the point. Ethan had moved out a month ago. He and Clara had found a small apartment near the coast. He still called every other day, sometimes just to talk about dinner or to ask how my plants were doing. "Clara's teaching me how to cook," he said once, laughing. "Apparently pasta isn't supposed to stick together." "She's a miracle worker then," I teased. He chuckled. "You should visit soon. Maybe stay for a while." "I might," I said, smiling. "But you know I like to give you your space." "Still," he said gently, "it'd be nice." It struck me how easily we could talk now. No tension, no eggshells, just honesty. That was something David's lies had never allowed us. Peace between mother and son. One evening, as I was closing the shop, because yes, I had one now, a woman stepped inside. After everything that had happened, I'd started selling pottery. It had begun as a hobby, but slowly grew into something real. A few friends convinced me to sell at local fairs, and before long, I opened a tiny storefront downtown, Rosa Clay & Co. The bell above the door jingled as the woman walked in. I turned around and froze. It was Lila. Her hair was shorter, her clothes simpler. Her face older somehow, but unmistakably her. For a heartbeat. Neither of us spoke. "Hi," she said softly, clutching her purse. "Hello," I managed. "I didn't expect to see you." "I wasn't sure I should come," she admitted. "But I heard about the scholarship. I wanted to thank you." "You don't owe me thanks," I said gently. "You earned your own peace." She smiled faintly, tears welling. "I started counseling again. I'm working part-time at a community center, trying to help other girls who went through things like I did." "That's good," I said quietly. "That's very good," she nodded, looking around at the shelves of pottery. "You made all these?" "Yes, they're not perfect, but they're mine." She ran her fingers lightly over a clay vase. "It's beautiful. You're different now," I smiled. "So are you," she hesitated. "Ethan?" "He's doing well, happy." Her lips trembled, but she smiled. "That's all I wanted to know." There was a long, quiet pause before she looked up again. "I know you may never forgive me. I don't blame you, but I want you to know I forgive myself now." Tears stung my eyes, but I nodded. "Then that's enough." She smiled one last time and turned toward the door. Before she left, I said softly, "Lila?" She looked back. "I forgive you too." Her eyes widened slightly, shimmering with something like relief. Then she nodded, whispered, "Thank you," and stepped out into the golden evening light. I stood there for a while, the shop quiet around me, the air warm and full of clay dust and sunlight. And for the first time, forgiveness didn't feel like surrender. It felt like freedom. That night, I closed the shop early and walked home. The streetlights flickered on one by one, soft and steady. I passed by the old church, the one where everything had fallen apart, and paused at the gate. Inside, the lights glowed faintly through stained glass. I walked in. The priest, an older man now, recognized me instantly. "Mrs. Reynolds," he said softly. "It's been a long time." I nodded. "I just wanted to see the place again." He smiled gently. "You're welcome here any time." I sat in the last pew staring at the altar. The same place where my life had shattered. But now it didn't hurt. It just existed, like an old scar that no longer ached when touched. After a while, I whispered into the silence, "Thank you for stopping that ceremony. You saved us all that day." The priest smiled faintly. "Sometimes truth shows up at the worst possible moment. But it's always the right one," I smiled. "I believe that now." When I got home, I poured a cup of tea and sat by the window. The moon hung low and bright outside, the same way it had the night David left for the last time. But this time, I didn't feel grief. I felt gratitude, because through all the heartbreak, the scandal, the lies, I'd found something worth keeping. Myself. I glanced at the vase on the mantel. The one I'd made with my own hands, imperfect, whole, just like me. Summer came with soft heat and the smell of jasmine. The kind of season that made everything feel new again, like even time itself wanted to start over. By now, the cracks in my life had grown flowers. The shop was doing well. People came not just to buy pottery, but to talk, to share stories, to breathe for a while. I hadn't expected that, for Rosa Clay & Co. to become a kind of sanctuary. Every piece I made carried a bit of me inside it, the patience, the grief, the rebuilding. It wasn't about selling things anymore. It was about giving people something that could hold their own stories. One afternoon, as I was glazing a vase, the doorbell chimed. I looked up expecting a customer. It was Ethan. He looked tanned, brighter somehow. Clara stood beside him, her hand resting on his arm. And for the first time, I noticed how they looked at each other, like two people who'd found the courage to be vulnerable again. "Mom," he said, smiling. "We have news." I set down my brush. "Good or bad?" He laughed. "Good. We're getting married." The words hung in the air like sunlight through glass, warm, clean, healing. I felt tears prick my eyes. "Oh, Ethan." I walked over, pulling them both into a hug. "That's wonderful," Clara smiled through her tears. "We wanted you to be the first to know." My throat tightened. "Thank you, I'm honored." For a moment, we just stood there. Three people who'd crawled through fire and somehow made it to the other side, still standing. They decided to keep the wedding small. No grand venue, no photographers, no gossip. Just family and close friends. When Ethan asked if I wanted to host it in our backyard, I hesitated. The same place where so much pain had once lived. But then I realized that was exactly why it should be there. The past didn't own that space anymore. We did, so I said yes. The weeks that followed were a flurry of preparation. Margaret helped with everything naturally. "If I'm not maid of honor, I'm revolting," she declared, waving a clipboard like a general. Clara's family was warm and kind. Simple people with open hearts. The kind who hugged first and asked questions later. And me? I was learning to let joy in again, without guilt. Sometimes I'd catch myself smiling for no reason, like while arranging flowers or watching the light hit the new vases in the window. It felt foreign at first, then natural. Healing wasn't loud. It was quiet, gentle. Like a sunrise you didn't realize you were watching until the world was bright again. The morning of the wedding was perfect. Not too hot, not too windy. The backyard was filled with white chairs, soft music, and sunlight dancing through the trees. When Ethan saw me walking toward him before the ceremony, he smiled. "You look beautiful, Mom," I laughed. "You clean up pretty well yourself." Then the music shifted, and Clara appeared at the end of the aisle. Radiant, calm, her dress simple but stunning. Ethan's eyes filled instantly. As she walked toward him, I felt the tears come. But this time, they weren't from pain. They were from gratitude, for the second chance, for the peace we'd earned, for the proof that love could still exist after betrayal, and that truth, though brutal, could clear the way for something better. When the priest began to speak, the same one who had once stopped a wedding in this very town, his voice was gentle but steady. "Today," he said, smiling faintly at me, "we celebrate not just love, but redemption." He looked between Ethan and Clara, then at me, and we are reminded that sometimes what breaks us also rebuilds us. Ethan and Clara exchanged vows. Simple. Raw, honest, I promise, Clara said softly. Never to hide, never to lie, and never to let fear speak louder than love. When they kissed, the crowd erupted in applause, and I laughed through my tears. That night, after everyone left, I sat alone in the quiet backyard. The chairs were empty now, the music gone, but the air still shimmered with warmth. I looked up at the stars and whispered, "You see that, David? He did it right this time." The wind stirred the trees gently, as if in answer. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small ceramic heart I'd made for the wedding. 2 halves fused together. I buried it under the old oak tree at the edge of the yard, pressing the soil down with my hands. Not as a grave, but as a promise. That love could return. Honest. Imperfect. Whole. A week later, I received a letter. It was from Lila. "Dear Mrs. Reynolds, I heard about the wedding. I smiled the whole day, even from afar. I just wanted to thank you again. Not for forgiving me, but for teaching me what real strength looks like. You told me once that peace doesn't come from forgetting. I believe that now. I hope you do too. With love, Lila." I read it twice, then folded it neatly and placed it inside the vase on my mantel, the same one that had replaced our old wedding photo. Life had come full circle, and I was finally ready to live the rest of it on my own terms. That evening, Ethan called from their honeymoon. His laughter filled the line bright and free. "We're watching the sunset, Mom. Clara says hi." I smiled, eyes warm. "Tell her I said to hold on tight. The world gets messy, but it's still beautiful." He laughed softly. "Like you always say." And as I hung up, I realized I had said that before. But now, for the first time, I believed it. Years passed quietly, the way good years do, without fanfare, without warning. The seasons turned, the town grew a little busier, and Rosa Clay & Co. became something of a local landmark. People came not just to buy pottery, but to talk about life, loss, and healing. I never advertised it that way, but word got around. Someone once called it a place where broken things get a second chance. I liked that. I was in my 60s now, hair streaked with silver that I no longer tried to hide. My hands were lined, strong, marked by years of clay and fire. When I looked at them, I saw proof, not of age, but of survival. Ethan and Clara visited every few weeks with their little girl, Lily. She was 3 now, a storm of curls and questions. The first time she toddled into my shop, she reached for one of my bowls, looked up and said, "Nana made this?" When I said yes, she clapped her tiny hands. Pretty. And somehow, that one word made everything I'd lived through worth it. One afternoon, Ethan came by alone. I was sitting at the work table, shaping clay into a small bowl, the radio humming softly in the background. He leaned against the doorframe, smiling. "You still at it, huh?" "Old habits die hard," I said, wiping my hands on a towel. "How's Clara?" "She's good, busy. Lily's keeping her on her toes." I smiled. That's what kids are for. He hesitated, then said, "Mom, I wanted to tell you something." I looked up. "They're offering me a promotion," he said, "but it's in another city, across the state. It's a big opportunity." I froze for a moment, feeling the weight of what that meant. Fewer visits, quieter days. But then I saw the light in his eyes, the same spark he used to have before the world broke him. "That's wonderful, Ethan," I said softly. "You should take it." "You sure?" I nodded. "You've built your own life now. Don't let fear of leaving hold you back." "I'll be fine," he smiled, relief flickering in his eyes. "You always say that, and somehow I believe you." "You should," I said, chuckling. "Because it's true." That night, after he left, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea and watched the sun go down. The air smelled like lilac and rain. It hit me how full the circle had become. The same house that once felt like a prison of secrets was now my sanctuary. The same silence that once suffocated me now comforted me. Even David's ghost, that constant shadow, had faded into memory. Not gone, just quiet. Sometimes I still talk to him, though. Not in grief, not in anger. Just like old friends who had shared something deep and painful and real. See? I murmured to the twilight. We made it through. The wind rustled the trees and I smiled. A few months later, I received an invitation in the mail. A simple card with soft gold lettering. The annual Reynolds Scholarship Dinner, at the bottom, in neat print, honoring Rosa Reynolds for her continued contributions to women's education and empowerment. I laughed softly when I saw it. I hadn't even realized how much the fund had grown. People had donated, shared it, expanded it into something bigger than any of us had imagined. At the dinner, they handed me a small plaque. My name engraved beneath the words, "In gratitude for turning pain into purpose." I stood at the podium, the microphone humming faintly, and said simply, "Life has a way of breaking us in all the wrong places. But sometimes that's how the light gets in. If you're standing here tonight because someone hurt you, remember, you can still make something beautiful from it." I did. The room went quiet. Then came the applause. Soft at first, then steady, sincere. And in that moment, I felt everything. The heartbreak, the healing, the long road that led here. When I got home that night, the moon was high. The house was still. I poured myself a glass of wine and walked into the backyard, where the old oak tree still stood, the same one where I'd buried the ceramic heart years ago. The grass had grown tall around it, wild and free. I knelt down, brushing my fingers through the dirt until they touched something solid, the clay heart. I dug it out gently. Time had dulled its color, cracked it slightly along one edge, but it was still whole. Still holding together, I wiped it clean and held it up to the moonlight. "This is what we do," I whispered. "We break, we mend. We keep going." Then I set it on the stone ledge by the tree, where it caught the moonlight like something sacred, and I realized this was never a story about betrayal. It was a story about becoming. Weeks later, as autumn returned, I sat in the shop one quiet morning when a young woman entered. She looked nervous, holding one of my vases in her hands. "Are you Rosa?" she asked softly. "I am," I said, smiling. "What can I do for you?" "I just wanted to tell you, I got the scholarship last year. It saved me. I'm graduating next month." She hesitated, then added, "I want to make things like this one day. Things that remind people they're still whole." I felt tears sting my eyes as I said, "You already are." She smiled, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of all the women before her, me, Lila, every girl who'd carried the weight of someone else's choices and still stood tall. When she left, I sat there for a long while, the sunlight slanting across the shelves of clay. The world wasn't perfect. It never would be, but it was good, and that was enough. As evening fell, I stepped outside one last time. The sky glowed in shades of gold and rose. I took a deep breath and whispered into the wind, "Thank you, not to anyone in particular, just to life, for the pain that had sharpened me, for the peace that had softened me, and for the love that had somehow found its way back home." Thumbnail text: I baked a cake for my birthday. But inside was a note that said, "Get out of my house." I thought that was the worst day of my life, until I found out the truth behind it.